Arlene Blum, and I'm a Himalayan mountain climber. I'm also a scientist leading the Green Science Policy Institute towards reducing the use of PFAS, flame retardants, and all the bad chemicals we were just hearing about. So here I am on my way to leading the first American expedition that was successful in climbing Annapurna 1. And Annapurna 1 is actually considered the most difficult and dangerous of all the world's high mountains. So I'm not sure how I ended up doing that. I was younger, 1978. But I have to say that the challenge we're all facing in stopping plastic pollution by 2040 is even more difficult and way more important than climbing the world's hardest and most difficult mountains. So we all have heard and will continue that single-use plastics are a huge problem. We need to stop their use. But I will say there are certain plastics that are useful. At least we haven't found replacements in things like medical devices, some electronics, and they should be free of toxic chemicals. And our institute's work is doing that. So one big problem is you may not realize, but you drink from a BPA-free water bottle and you think this is great. However, the usual replacement for BPA is BPS, which is equally harmful. And that's what's called the regrettable substitute problem. And we need to not be drinking from water bottles that contain BPA to BPZ. We have to think about the whole class at once. So when you think about harmful chemicals, here represented by jelly beans, there are tens of thousands of harmful petrochemicals. And it's a huge problem because it takes years of scientific research and advocacy to regulate a single chemical. And when a chemical is regulated, the tendency is to find a drop-in replacement, a chemical cousin that's similar in structure, function, and you've guessed it, toxicity. And then we can just keep cycling. So what do we do to stop the problem? About a decade ago, our institute came up with the idea of grouping these chemicals into families or classes with similar structure, function, and toxicity, and that there were 6 classes that contained the majority of the harmful chemicals in everyday products, and that once we know what they are, we can learn about them and reduce their use. The 6 classes are PFAS, we just heard about, antimicrobials, flame retardants, bisphenols and phthalates, metals, and solvents. And similarly, they're the harmful chemical, a lot of them, not all, there's thousands of harmful chemicals, but they're the majority of the harmful chemicals in our plastics, in our products, and we can do something about it. So I'm going to talk today mostly about flame retardants and PFAS. So my time with flame retardants began a long time ago when I found that baby pajamas were 10% by weight a harmful flame retardant called Tris. And when a child wore Tris pajamas for one night and we collected her urine, there were harmful Tris breakdown products, cancer-causing chemicals in the child's urine. And you might say, how could that be? Doesn't the government protect us from harmful chemicals? Okay, this audience knows the answer. But people, I think, don't realize that foods, drugs, and pesticides, things that go into our mouths, are regulated. But other chemicals, there's really not a requirement for scientific research or government approval for nearly all other chemicals, such as flame retardants. So just when I learned about the problem with the children's pajamas and was about to write a paper to tell the parents of America about this problem, I got invited to this mountain. Do you know what mountain it is? It's Mount Everest. And in that time, Everest had only been climbed once by Americans, and no American woman had ever even had the opportunity to try Mount Everest. So I had this terrible dilemma. Did I go to Mount Everest, or did I stay and write the paper? So how many of you would have gone to Mount Everest? How many of you would have stayed to write the paper? Okay, well, I did both. And when I was climbing up steep ice faces on Mount Everest and walking through beautiful, deep canyons of ice, every night I got to my tent and I wrote my paper. And when I reached my high point at 24,000 feet on Everest, which was at that point an altitude record for American women, I sent my paper by Sherpa mail runner back to Kathmandu, and it was published in Science magazine as a lead article a few months later. And this paper says something about the work our institute does now. If those of you who have read scientific papers, how do they always end? With what statement? More study is needed, which is very safe. So we did a few experiments, and we said, Tris flame retardants are harmful and they shouldn't be used. And that was a big statement. And when scientists go ahead and make big statements, things can change. And 3 months later, the Consumer Product Safety Commission banned Tris from children's pajamas, which is a really good thing, and I thought the problem was solved. What I didn't know was flame retardants continued, including Tris, continued to be used in a lot of other products, such as furniture, children's products, electronics, and cars. And to get an idea of how serious this problem is, one flame retardant called Penta, which was in most of our furniture and our cars for 30 years, has led to an IQ loss of 4 to 6 points in our children. Such an IQ loss lessens people's future possibilities and has been calculated to cost tens of billions of dollars. The good news is that working with industry, government, firefighters, we were able to change flammability standards. So for the last decade, there are not flame retardants in furniture or in children's products, which is a great thing. However, they are still in cars and electronics. And we've been working on it for 10 years, but I have a little good news on cars. Right now, we have bipartisan support in the US House and Senate, if you can believe, to start developing new flammability standards to get the cancer-causing chemicals out of our cars. Electronics are a big problem. When you put flame retardants in the cases around electronics, you end up with the famous black plastic spatula. If you all remember, there was advice that you should throw away your black plastic spatula. Well, that's not the answer. The answer is not to put unnecessary harmful flame retardants in our black plastic. And indeed, when you do, you end up with flame retardants in your spatula, your soup spoon, your soup, and you. And so that's something else we're working on together, very important. So I'm just going to say a few words about forever chemicals, PFAS, which are very problematic. They never break down, ever. They'll be on the planet possibly longer than humanity. And all the ones that have been studied are harmful. As you heard, they're in a lot of our drinking water. But I do have good news. A lot of NGOs, including us, have been working, and now there's changes in regulations, mostly at the state level. We don't need to have PFAS in our food packaging. It's not required or allowed. Similarly, carpeting, outdoor gear, textiles are all getting out of PFAS. So those are just 2 of the 6 classes, but I think these are a majority of the harmful chemicals in our products, and we can learn where they are, we can reduce their use and be healthier. So I'm just going to end by saying that getting toxics out of plastic and products is very similar to climbing the world's highest mountains. First, you need to find a team who share your vision. I think we're all on the team, a vision of a healthier plastic-free world. Then you need to raise money, buy supplies, pack up heavy loads, and slog step by step up the mountain. There are going to be storms, avalanches, a Yeti might pop out in your way. But together, we can reach the summit of a healthier world without harmful chemicals in our plastic, in our products, or in us. We're all on the team. Let's go together towards the summit. Thank you.